Greetings everyone, I am Dr. Wolf and I just saw Going to Seed, another Applejack and Applebloom centered episode, perhaps the last one in the entire series. Now, when I first read the synopsis for this a little while back, I was thinking, is this going to be another story where Applebloom keeps looking for the shortcut, because we've certainly seen that a few times before? And is this going to be another episode where Applejack is trying to teach young Applebloom about having a good work ethic? I don't know if that could be a story that would really keep me engaged. I mean, yeah, we've seen that multiple times before from both of these characters. So going into this, I was a little hesitant on exactly what they could bring with this story. And yet, the MLP staff did throw a few curveballs that I did not see coming. Some others which, yeah, I could suspect were coming, and turns out I was right, but overall, I did appreciate that it didn't go the way I expected it would, especially with the lesson. But let's start from the beginning. First off, we have the confluence that only comes about once every 100 moons or so, and Granny Smith enlists some help from Golden Delicious. And yeah, it does add a few bits of comedy throughout the episode when you have this horde of cats getting into everything, and even Winona trying to chase them at one point. So that was definitely helpful. And apparently Big Mac is being overworked to the point of complete exhaustion here. And honestly, he is getting the short end of the stick throughout this entire episode. I mean, in the beginning, it's all about because he's making the schedule, but later on, it's not only Applebloom who is spending more time setting up these traps, but surprisingly, Applejack as well. And yeah, it kind of makes sense that he's severely tired all the time, and it kind of makes sense that he would be setting off all these traps on his own because he's so tired. And yet, I could see it coming that Big Mac is the one who's causing all of the problems and getting all these trees bucked in the first place. That doesn't entirely explain the crop circles or apple circles and later on carrot circles that turn up. And I think that's kind of the point with this story, and something I don't think the MLP staff have ever tackled in the series before, which is a big plus. Having Applebloom being interested in the great seedling, and not just because she's young and she remembers stories from long ago, but rather because Golden Delicious is encouraging it from the get-go. I mean, even Granny Smith gets in on it later on, and yeah, that does make the story stronger. I honestly think the story wouldn't work nearly as well if Applebloom was the only one trying to get after this great seedling and all of the adults are trying to dissuade her from it. It makes her much more compelling when there are others who are trying to encourage it. And at first, when Applejack is trying to show Applebloom a good work ethic, that you need to put away these childish things and learn to be a more responsible adult like we are, I thought that's what the story was going to come to in the end, about learning that you need to put aside some of the more whimsical aspects of childhood and look forward towards the future, which would be maybe an okay lesson, but I've certainly seen variations of it in the series before. But instead, there was a pleasant surprise in that Applejack is actually kind of getting into this great seedling story too. And yeah, the lesson is not so much about growing up, but not letting go of your childhood entirely, or fullhood in this case. And I suppose I can understand that this might be an improper lesson if those who are watching it take the wrong reasoning from it, because it's not entirely about putting aside your adult responsibilities. It's not about putting aside the work and setting up the traps and trying to hold on to your whimsical childhood. It's kind of a mix of both. And what makes it all the stronger is that catching the great seedling wasn't the point. The point was actually Applejack and Applebloom finding a connection again in something whimsical. Even if it turns out that it's not true, it's actually leading to a much greater bond between them. It's kind of bringing back a softer side to Applejack as a character. And in the final season of the show, hey, that's actually a really good direction to take. Now, this is far from the most fun episode this season. That definitely goes to frenemies. And yet, this is definitely one of the stronger lessons, because I don't think the MLP series has tackled it in quite this way before. It's essentially learning to be childlike, but not childish. And that's something I can really get behind. Learning to be an adult. Learning to focus on your responsibilities and knowing that hard work is its own reward, that work is good and play must be earned. Those are all very important lessons. And yet, in the midst of it, this episode is trying to tell its audience it's okay to have all those adult responsibilities and making sure that you are collecting the harvest in that short window of time, because it's not going to be coming back anytime soon. And yet, you shouldn't entirely let go of that whimsy that came with childhood either. There is an innocence in childhood that allows a young person to have a wonder about the world around them, to continually ask questions, to always have that curiosity, to always want to learn and improve. In Applejack's case, I think this episode is trying to say that when you lose that whimsy for the world around you, when you lose that curiosity, when you just get into your set pattern and stay there for the rest of your life, you kind of stagnate. And as this episode shows, capturing that whimsy once in a while can help you to create greater bonds with your siblings, or with friends, or with anyone. And yeah, I think this is a very unique way of tackling that lesson, because in essence, this is kind of like searching for Santa Claus, or the Easter Bunny, or Bigfoot for all that matters. Understanding that you may never find that whimsy, never find the answers to those questions. And yet, the journey may be the point. Understanding that you can capture that sense of responsibility while holding on to that bit of childlike wonder too. Because, as it says early on in this episode, Applejack is making compromises with Apple Bloom, helping her to understand this harvest is important. And yet at the same time, I understand that finding the great seedling is important to you. So I'm going to help you as long as you maintain your responsibility. And yeah, it's an interesting way of putting it. Golden Delicious and Granny don't really have that much to do in the episode, but yeah, I appreciate the few moments that did make me chuckle, especially with the horde of cats coming out of nowhere every now and again. And yeah, it kind of answers a question on exactly what Winona and the cats actually eat when the ponies are clearly herbivores. They're feeding on the pancakes that the ponies eat. I mean, does that make sense for feeding animals that way? It certainly wouldn't in our world, but hey, this is Equestria after all. Big Mac getting the short end of the stick, constantly being brushed aside and given more of a workload, and being stressed out to the point where he can't even sleep well at night and ends up doing work while he's dreaming. It's a bit of a letdown knowing that, okay, Big Mac is kind of behind all of this. He's just completely exhausted and for some reason ends up having a costume that looks like the great seedling in the shadows. Yeah, that was kind of pushing it, but that wasn't really the point of the story. This was about reintroducing the sisterly bond between Applejack and Apple Bloom and showing a softer side to Applejack where he understands that growing up is not the whole point of being an adult. Being childlike, but not childish, can help you to hold on to that wonder about the world around you. that curiosity that helps you to learn and grow and capture a little bit of that childlike joy again. I don't know if that's what the MLP staff intended with this lesson, but that's certainly what I got out of it. While it's far from my favorite this season, I left this episode feeling, yeah, I think that was worthwhile. I think that is something that I'll remember. It's not just a standard episode to get through a standard story that we've seen many times before in the series. This tackles in a bit of a new way. And so, thank you MLP staff for giving me that kind of childlike wonder. But then, what did each of you think? Given how much we've seen of Applejack and Applebloom and even the two of them together in the series thus far, is this a good way to close out their chapter? Especially with that very short scene of seeing Bright Mac and Pear Butter again, and a very young Applejack and a baby Applebloom working alongside them. Leave your thoughts in the comments below, because as always, I am Dr. Wolf, and I look forward to hearing from you.